But does it feel weird for you to start sort of
Having to
thinking of
refer
her
to
as the Queen?
Not really.
Andrew Parker Bowles kept this secret for decades. Then one night, he decided he was done keeping it. The confession came quietly. No press release, no interview, just words spoken to the wrong person in the wrong room at the wrong time. And now Camilla is the one dealing with the consequences. The man Camilla married. First, Andrew Parker Bowles is not a man who gets talked about enough, and that suits him perfectly. He exists in the margins of the Camilla story in the way that first husbands always exist in the margins when the second chapter is considerably more famous than the first. The world knows Camilla as Charles's wife, as the woman who waited, as the queen consort who outlasted decades of public hostility to arrive at the highest female title in the British monarchy. Andrew Parker Bowles is the chapter that comes before all of that, the chapter that most people skip because the later ones are more dramatic. That is a mistake, because Andrew Parker Bowles is not a marginal figure in this story. He is a central one, and understanding who he is, what he was, and what kind of marriage he and Camilla actually had is essential to understanding why his confession landed the way it did. Andrew Henry Parker Bowles was born on the 27th of December in the year 1939. He came from exactly the kind of English Catholic landed gentry background that produces a specific type of man: confident, socially assured, comfortable in rooms where power is exercised and decisions are made. He was educated at Ampleforth College, the prestigious Catholic boarding school in Yorkshire. He went on to Sandhurst. He was commissioned into the Royal Horse Guards in the year 1960 and built a military career that was genuinely distinguished rather than simply honorific. He rose to the rank of brigadier. He served in Northern Ireland, in Cyprus, in Rhodesia. He was not a desk soldier. He was a man who operated in difficult environments with the particular kind of calm that serious military training produces in the people it does not break. He was decorated. He was respected by the people who served under him and by the people who commanded him. His military career was the real thing. He was also, by every account of people who knew him during those years, extraordinarily attractive in the specific way that confident, physically imposing, socially fluent men of his background and generation tend to be. He moved through his world with an ease that drew people toward him, women particularly, and he was not, by the standards of his social circle in the 1960s and 70s, a man who felt any great obligation to resist that particular form of attention. This is the context in which he met Camilla Shand. They moved in overlapping social circles in the early 1970s. The world they inhabited was small, tight, and governed by its own unwritten rules about what was acceptable and what was not. They were drawn to each other. The attraction was real and it was mutual. But the path to marriage was not straightforward. There was Charles. There was the complicated triangular history between the three of them that has been documented and analyzed and argued over ever since. And there was the specific question of what Andrew Parker Bowles actually wanted from his life, and from the woman he would eventually marry. He married Camilla on the 4th of July in the year 1973. The wedding took place at the Guards Chapel in London. It was a significant social occasion, the kind of event that filled the right pages of the right publications and confirmed the Parker Bowles union as one of the more notable marriages of their particular world. What it did not confirm was what was actually happening beneath the surface of that marriage. And beneath the surface, things were considerably more complicated than the wedding photographs suggested. The marriage that was never what it seemed. There is a version of the Parker Bowles marriage that the public has always been offered. It goes like this. Andrew and Camilla were a golden couple of their social world. Military man and his charming wife. Hunting, horses, the English countryside, 2 children. A life that looked, from the outside, like exactly what it was supposed to look like. And then Charles happened. The affair became known. The marriage collapsed. Divorce in 1995. End of story. That version is not wrong exactly, but it is incomplete in ways that matter enormously. Because the people who were close to Andrew and Camilla during those years tell a different story, not a tidier one, a considerably messier one in which the marriage was complicated from the very beginning by a set of mutual understandings that were never spoken aloud, but that both parties lived by with a consistency that suggests they were very clearly understood by both of them. The Parker-Bowles marriage was not a conventional union. It never was. Andrew Parker Bowles was not a faithful husband. This is not a secret. It has been documented, discussed, and confirmed by enough people from their social circle that it long ago crossed the line from rumor into established fact. He had relationships outside his marriage during the years he was married to Camilla. Multiple relationships, conducted with varying degrees of discretion, but with a consistency that made them, within their specific social world, an open secret of the particular kind that English upper-class society has always been most comfortable maintaining. The names of some of the women involved have surfaced over the years in various accounts of this period. Princess Anne has been mentioned in this context, a claim that has never been confirmed or denied in any official capacity, but that has persisted long enough and appeared in enough credible accounts to be taken seriously by people who study this period carefully. There were others, women from the same social world, women who moved in the same circles and attended the same events and understood the rules of the environment they were operating in. Camilla knew. This is the detail that changes everything about how you read the marriage. She was not a naive woman being deceived by a husband whose behavior she was unaware of. She was a woman operating inside a marriage with a clear-eyed understanding of its actual nature. The arrangement, such as it was, appears to have been one of mutual latitude. Andrew conducted his life with a freedom that a more conventional marriage would not have permitted. And Camilla, in return, maintained her own connection with Charles that Andrew was aware of, and appears to have tolerated with an equanimity that puzzled the people around them at the time. Why would a man tolerate his wife's relationship with the Prince of Wales? That question has never been fully answered in public. The explanations offered over the years range from social ambition to genuine emotional complexity to the particular codes of their world, where these arrangements were more common than outsiders understood. None of those explanations is entirely satisfying on its own. All of them are probably partially true simultaneously. What is certain is that the marriage functioned on terms that were specific to the two people inside it, terms that bore very little resemblance to the conventional picture the outside world was being presented with. And one of those terms involved a midnight affair that Andrew has now confessed to, an affair that nobody saw coming, and that changes the story considerably. The Midnight Affair. Every secret has a shelf life. Some secrets last a lifetime. The person who holds them carries them carefully, protects them consistently, and takes them to the grave without ever letting them surface in a form that can cause damage. Those are the secrets that history never gets to examine. The ones that die with their keepers and leave only the faint outline of something unresolved in the stories told afterward. And then there are the other kind. The secrets that are too large and too complicated and too entangled with too many other people's lives to stay contained forever. The ones that press outward against the boundaries of the people holding them until eventually, under the right circumstances and at the right moment, they find a way out. Andrew Parker Bowles had been holding this one for a very long time. The affair itself began in the early 1980s. The precise timing matters because of the context it sits inside. This was a period when the Parker-Bowles marriage was publicly intact. Andrew and Camilla were still husband and wife in every formal and social sense. Charles had married Diana in 1981. The fairy tale wedding had captivated the world. The narrative in the public imagination was clean and settled. Charles and Diana. Andrew and Camilla, two married couples living the lives they were supposed to be living. Beneath that clean narrative, everything was considerably more complicated. The woman at the center of Andrew's midnight affair was not a stranger to their social world. She was embedded in it. She moved in the same circles, attended the same gatherings, knew the same people. She was not a random encounter or a brief distraction of the kind that men of Andrew's background and temperament sometimes permitted themselves without attaching much significance to the result. This was something more sustained than that, more deliberate, more emotionally weighted in ways that made it different in character from the other relationships Andrew had conducted outside his marriage. The affair was conducted at night, hence the description that has attached itself to it in the accounts of people familiar with what happened. The midnight affair. The timing was not romantic in its motivation, it was practical. It was the specific logistics of two people managing a relationship inside a social world where visibility was unavoidable and discretion was therefore a matter of constant active management. Daytime carried too much risk. Evening social occasions carried too much risk. The hours after midnight, in the specific geography of their shared world, offered a window that could be used without generating the kind of observation that their circumstances made so dangerous. They used that window consistently for a period that sources familiar with the situation describe as spanning several years. Not weeks, not months, years. This was not a fleeting moment of weakness or a brief episode that both parties quietly agreed to set aside and never revisit. It was a sustained relationship conducted in parallel with everything else Andrew was publicly presenting to the world: his marriage, his military career, his social life, his role as the husband of the woman the Prince of Wales was in love with. That last detail is the one that gives the affair its particular charge. Because Andrew Parker Bowles was not simply a man conducting an extramarital relationship. He was conducting that relationship while simultaneously being one of the few people in their social world who knew the full complexity of what was happening between his wife and the heir to the throne. He had knowledge that most people around him did not have. He understood the actual nature of his marriage in ways that the outside world was not being shown, and he was using the cover that marriage provided, the public respectability of the Parker-Bowles union, to conduct his own private life with a freedom that depended entirely on that cover remaining intact. It is a layered situation, almost dizzyingly so. Now, here's the detail that makes it more complicated still. Charles did not know about this affair during the years it was happening. That is the conclusion supported by the accounts of people familiar with the situation. Charles was aware, in the general way of someone operating in a small and interconnected social world, that Andrew Parker Bowles was not a faithful husband. That was not a secret within their circle, but the specific nature of this particular relationship, the identity of the woman involved, the duration of it, the deliberate midnight logistics of how it was conducted, those specifics were not known to Charles. They were kept from him, carefully and consistently kept from him, by the people who did know. Why does that matter? It matters because of what it says about the information environment Charles was operating in during those years. He was navigating an extraordinarily complex personal situation. His love for Camilla, his marriage to Diana, the institutional pressures bearing down on him from every direction, with an incomplete picture of what was actually happening around him. The man he was effectively sharing Camilla with, in the complicated geometry of those years, was himself conducting a hidden relationship that added another layer to an already impossibly layered situation. And Charles was the last person in the relevant circle to know any of it. The affair ended. The specific circumstances of how it concluded have not been fully disclosed in the accounts that have filtered outward. What is known is that it did not end dramatically. It did not end with a confrontation or an exposure or a crisis that forced a reckoning. It ended in the way that these things sometimes end when the people involved are disciplined enough to manage their own situations. Quietly, mutually, with the particular discretion of people who understood the stakes of anything less than complete containment. It stayed contained for decades, until Andrew Parker Bowles decided, for reasons that are themselves a story worth examining closely, that he was done containing it. What made him talk is the question that nobody has fully answered yet. And the answer, when you find it, is more surprising than the confession itself. What Charles knew and when. Knew and when knowledge is power inside the British royal family. But incomplete knowledge is something more dangerous than ignorance. Because incomplete knowledge gives you the confidence to act on a picture of the world that is missing crucial details. It lets you believe you understand a situation that you are actually only partially seeing, and when the missing details eventually surface, they do not just add information to what you already knew, they reframe everything you thought you knew in ways that can be deeply destabilizing. Charles has been operating on incomplete knowledge for most of his adult life. That is not a criticism. It is an observation about the specific environment he has always inhabited. The British royal court is not a place where complete and unfiltered information flows freely to the people at the center of it. It is a place where information is managed, curated, shaped by the interests of the people controlling its movement before it reaches the person it most directly concerns. Charles, as the heir to the throne and then as king, has always been surrounded by people whose professional function includes deciding what he needs to know and what he does not. That filter has not always served him well. In the specific case of Andrew Parker Bowles and the Midnight Affair, the filter held for a remarkably long time. Let us establish what Charles did know and when he knew it, because the timeline matters here in ways that are not immediately obvious. Charles knew from the early years of Camilla's marriage to Andrew that Andrew was not faithful. This was not privileged information. It was understood within their social circle with a particular clarity that small, interconnected worlds tend to develop around the behavior of their most prominent members. Andrew's relationships outside his marriage were not conducted with enough discretion to be entirely invisible to the people around him. Charles was aware in the general sense. He knew the broad shape of Andrew's character in this regard. What Charles did not know was the specific, the identity of the woman involved in the Midnight Affair, the duration of it, the deliberate and sustained nature of a relationship that had been conducted in parallel with everything else that was happening in that world during those years. The fact that someone he trusted, someone embedded in the intimate geography of his own complicated personal life, had been conducting a hidden relationship of this significance without his knowledge. That specific information did not reach Charles during the years the affair was happening. It did not reach him in the immediate aftermath of the Parker Bowles divorce in 1995 either. That was a period of enormous personal and public complexity for everyone involved. The divorce happened in the same year that Charles's own marriage to Diana was publicly acknowledged to have broken down irretrievably. The world was watching everything. Every development in the lives of the people at the center of this story was being tracked and reported and analyzed with an intensity that made privacy almost impossible to maintain. In that environment, the specific details of Andrew's midnight affair stayed buried. There was too much else happening, too many other fires burning. The particular secret that Andrew was holding did not surface. It did not surface through the years that followed either, through Diana's death in 1997, through the long, slow rehabilitation of Camilla in public life, through Charles and Camilla's marriage in 2005, through Charles's accession to the throne in 2022. Through all of it, the Midnight Affair stayed contained. The information did not move. The people who knew it did not talk. And Charles remained in the position of a man who believed he had a reasonably complete picture of the history he was navigating. He did not. The moment the information began to move toward Charles is the moment this story becomes genuinely explosive. And that moment came, according to people familiar with what happened, in the period following Andrew Parker Bowles' confession. Because a confession, once made, does not stay in the room where it was spoken. It travels. It finds its way through the networks of the social world in which it was made, and the social world in which Andrew Parker Bowles made his confession is a world with direct and well-established connections to the royal household. The information reached Charles in stages, not in a single comprehensive briefing, not in a formal conversation where someone sat down with him and laid out the full picture from beginning to end. In the way that uncomfortable information always reaches people at the center of these stories, through fragments, through a detail mentioned in one context that connects with something heard in another context. The identity of the woman involved, the duration of it, the deliberate midnight logistics of how it was conducted, those specifics were not known to Charles. Through the gradual accumulation of pieces that eventually form a picture clear enough to be undeniable. The people closest to Charles during this period describe a man who processed what he was learning with the particular stillness that he deploys when something has landed in a way that requires careful management before any response is possible. He did not react visibly. He did not confront Camilla immediately or dramatically in the way that a less institutionally trained person might have done. He absorbed what he was learning, and he sat with it in the way of someone who understands that the first response to destabilizing information is rarely the right one. But sitting with it is not the same as being unaffected by it. The people who interacted with Charles in the period when this information was reaching him describe a quality in him that they had not seen in quite the same way before. A watchfulness, a particular kind of attention in his interactions with Camilla that was different from his usual manner with her. Not cold, not hostile, something more subtle and more unsettling than either of those things. The quality of a man who is looking at someone he has known for 50 years and realizing that there are things about that history he was never shown. That realization does not leave a person unchanged, not even a king. And what it changed between Charles and Camilla is still playing out in ways that the palace has not found a way to contain. Why? The confession came. Now? The question that nobody has fully answered is the simplest one. Why now? Andrew Parker Bowles kept this secret for decades. Through the most intensely scrutinized period in the history of the British royal family, through Diana's death and the public grief that followed it, through the years of Camilla's rehabilitation and Charles's patient campaign to make the woman he loved acceptable to a public that had decided it despised her, through the wedding in 2005, through the accession in 2022. Through all of it, Andrew said nothing. The secret stayed exactly where he had put it, contained, managed, protected by the particular discipline of a man who had spent his career in environments where discretion was not optional. And then something changed. Understanding what changed requires understanding where Andrew Parker Bowles is in his life right now. He is 85 years old. He has been divorced from Camilla for 30 years. He remarried in 1997, wedding Rosemary Pittman, a woman from his social world, whose quiet steadiness provided a stability that his first marriage, for all its social brilliance, never quite managed to offer. That marriage has been, by all accounts, genuinely happy in the way that second marriages sometimes are, when both parties arrive at them with a clear-eyed understanding of what they actually need, rather than what they think they are supposed to want. He has grandchildren. He has the particular freedom of a man in his 80s who has discharged his professional obligations, built his private life on terms that suit him, and arrived at a point where the question of what other people think about his choices carries considerably less weight than it once did. He is not a man who needs anything from the palace. He is not a man who needs anything from Camilla. He is not a man whose financial security, or social standing, or personal happiness depends on maintaining a particular version of the past. That freedom is the first part of the answer to why now. But freedom alone does not explain a confession of this specific nature at this specific moment. People who are free to speak do not always choose to speak. There has to be a trigger. Something that moved the calculation from silence being the comfortable default to speech being the necessary release. And the people familiar with Andrew's situation in the period leading up to the confession point, to a specific set of circumstances that appear to have shifted something in him. The first circumstance is health. Andrew Parker Bowles has faced health challenges in recent years, of the kind that tend to concentrate a person's attention on the question of what they want their story to be before they no longer have the ability to shape it. This is not speculation. It is a pattern that repeats consistently in the lives of people who carry significant secrets into old age. The approach of mortality has a way of making the weight of secrecy feel less sustainable than it did when the future felt longer and more open. Things that seem worth protecting indefinitely begin to feel less worth the continued effort of protection when the time available for that effort is visibly contracting. The second circumstance is more specific to the royal situation. The accession of Charles to the throne in September of 2022 changed the landscape of Andrew's relationship to the history he was holding. When Charles was Prince of Wales, the story of his relationship with Camilla was a complicated chapter in an ongoing life. When Charles became king, that story became history in a more fixed and permanent sense. The official narrative of the king and his queen consort was being written and set in institutional stone in a way that made Andrew's private knowledge feel more incongruous than it had before. He was in possession of information that contradicted in significant ways the version of events being institutionalized around him. And the gap between what he knew and what was being publicly cemented appears to have become harder to live with as the cementing continued. The third circumstance is the one that people closest to Andrew are most reluctant to discuss directly, but that surfaces consistently in the edges of their accounts. It involves Camilla herself. Specifically, it involves the way Camilla has navigated her public role as queen consort and the particular erasure of certain chapters of her history that her current position has required. Andrew Parker Bowles is not a man who requires public acknowledgement, but he is a man with a precise and long memory. and watching the official story of Camilla's life being written in ways that quietly edited out the full complexity of what their marriage actually was appears to have generated in him a feeling that is somewhere between mild irritation and genuine resentment. Not because he wanted to damage her. The accounts of people who know him suggest he bears Camilla no active ill will. Their relationship in the years since their divorce has been civil, and in some respects genuinely warm in the way of two people who share children and grandchildren and decades of shared history, and have managed to find a workable peace with all of it. The identity of the woman involved, the duration of it, the deliberate midnight logistics of how it was conducted. He is not a man conducting a campaign against his former wife, but he is a man who has his own version of events, and the older he gets, the less willing he appears to be to subordinate that version entirely to the institutional narrative being constructed around Camilla's current position. The confession itself happened in a social setting, not an interview, not a formal account given to a journalist or a biographer with a recorder running. A conversation. And the kind of conversation that happens between people who have known each other for a long time, in the particular atmosphere of relaxed social intimacy that lowers the guard of even the most disciplined people when the evening is right and the company is trusted. Andrew said more than he intended to say, or perhaps he said exactly what he intended to say, and simply chose his moment and his audience with the particular care of a man who has spent his life understanding how information travels. Either way, it traveled, and the person it traveled toward most consequentially was not a journalist, was not a royal biographer, was not someone outside the circle whose possession of the information would have been immediately obvious and immediately manageable. It was someone inside, appears to have been one of mutual latitude, someone close enough to the palace to ensure that what Andrew had said did not stay in the room where he had said it. That is the detail that made this confession different from a private admission. That is what turned a moment of personal candor into a palace crisis. And Camilla, who has survived almost everything this family and this public has thrown at her over 50 years, is now navigating the consequences of a secret she thought had been buried permanently. It was not buried, it was waiting. The fallout for Camilla. Camilla has survived worse than this. That is the argument her supporters make when this story comes up. And it is not an unreasonable argument. The woman has survived being the most hated person in Britain. She has survived the phone call recordings. She has survived Diana's Panorama interview. She has survived years of public blame for the destruction of the most famous marriage in the world. She survived all of it and arrived against every reasonable expectation at the position of Queen Consort. That argument misses something important. What Camilla survived in the past was external. Public hostility directed at her from outside the institution she was trying to enter. That kind of hostility, as brutal as it is, can be managed. You keep your head down, you do the work, you outlast the narrative. Camilla did exactly that. But what is happening now is different. What is happening now is internal. And internal damage inside the British royal family is considerably harder to manage because it operates in the one environment where Camilla's usual tools are least effective. The damage is happening inside her marriage. Charles has not confronted Camilla directly about what he has learned. That is consistent with everything known about how he handles personal complexity. He processes privately. He withdraws into a contained watchfulness that the people around him have learned to read as a sign that something significant is being worked through internally. Camilla has been living inside that stillness. People familiar with the dynamic between them describe a quality in the household that is different from what it was before. Not openly hostile, not dramatically altered in any visible way, but changed in the particular way that a relationship changes when new information has entered it, and neither party has found a way to address it directly. Dinners where conversation stays in safe territory, with a deliberateness both parties are aware of. Moments where Charles's attention moves away from Camilla in ways that are subtle enough to be deniable and obvious enough to be felt. This is not a marriage in open crisis, it is a marriage absorbing a shock. But the marriage is only one dimension of the fallout. The second dimension is Camilla's standing inside the broader household. The confession moved through the networks of the royal adjacent world and accumulated the quality that private information always accumulates as it travels. It became something people knew, something that added a complicated layer to an already complicated picture. Camilla has spent years building a narrative of her life that positions her as a woman who loved Charles through impossible circumstances and eventually arrived at the life she was meant to have. Andrew's confession has quietly complicated that narrative in ways she cannot address publicly without making things considerably worse. The third dimension is trust, specifically what Charles now understands about the information environment he was operating in during the most consequential years of his life. He made decisions during those years on the basis of what he knew at the time. He now knows that what he knew was incomplete in ways the people around him chose not to correct. That is a specific kind of betrayal, not dramatic, not the kind that generates confrontations or ultimatums. The quiet kind. The kind that settles into the foundation of a relationship and changes its load-bearing capacity in ways that become apparent over time. Camilla knows this. She knows the difference between a man who is temporarily unsettled and a man who has been changed by what he has learned. Andrew Parker Bowles kept his secret for decades. He is not keeping it anymore. And in the palace Camilla fought her entire life to belong to, the echo of that confession is still moving through the walls. If this story revealed something about the royal family you did not see coming, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next. And tell us this: do you think Charles will ever fully forgive Camilla? Or has something between them changed permanently?